1 Kings chapter 15. And this is really the first chapter we're going to come to where maybe a chart or something along these lines is really helpful. We've been bouncing back a little bit already between north and south Israel and Judah. But in this chapter, what's going to take place, this is going to happen several times, is there's going to be mention of kings because the author is focused on, let's say, for instance, Judah. And there will be mentions of kings in the north who happen to be reigning during that particular Judah king's reign that we haven't talked about yet. So we haven't read about them. We don't know about them yet. And so that's why sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to keep in place who's who, where are they, when are they reigning. And that's why I wanted to give you all these charts. And so you'll see an instance of that here in chapter 15. But 1 Kings 15, it says, Now in the 18th year of the king Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, reigned Abijam over Judah. And 3 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. And he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. Nevertheless, for David's sake did the Lord his God give him a lamp in Jerusalem to set up his son after him, and to establish Jerusalem. Because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. Now the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. And Abijam slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David, and Asa his son reigned in his stead. And in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, reigned Asa over Judah. And 41 years reigned he in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. And Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. And he took away the Sodomites out of the land, and he removed all the idols that his fathers had made, and also Maacah his mother. Even her he removed from being queen, because she had made an idol in a grove. And Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was perfect with the Lord all his days. And he brought in the things which his father had dedicated, and the things which himself had dedicated into the house of the Lord, silver and gold and vessels. We'll pause right there just for a minute. And so 18 years here into the reign of Jeroboam begins, or 18 years into Jeroboam's reign begins to reign Abijam. And so Abijam is now king of Judah. And so he reigns not for a very long time. He reigns for only 3 years. And unfortunately, just like Rehoboam did, he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, and his heart was not perfect with his Lord his God, as the heart of David his father. And so notice, and I wanted to just point this out quickly, Abijam walked in sin. He walked in sin because of his heart. And so it says he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, because his heart was not perfect with the Lord. Right? And so he walked in sin because of his heart was sinful. And so your feet will only take you where your heart wants to go. Right? And this is something that we as Christians need to be reminded of, because unless God gives you a new heart, that path is always going to be a sinful one. And so when we are given a new heart by Christ, our feet should be taking us where we desire to go, because where we desire to go should be, and I say should be that which Christ desires for us as well. And so Abijam, he was just walking where his heart wanted to go because he was sinful. He did not desire the things of God. And it should come as no surprise to us, because you look at the example that was left for him by his father, and we understand, I guess, why he would turn out this way. Now, we don't know much about his reign, either here or in the book of Chronicles. We're not told a whole lot about the reign of Abijam, but wicked though it may have been, God did allow Abijam, it says, to set up his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. And so, even though yes, he was a wicked king, he didn't do things right, he didn't do things as he should have done them. God still used this wicked king to establish the city of Jerusalem, to strengthen Jerusalem, and he gave him at least enough wisdom to set up the thing so that his son could become king, and we'll see in a second where that was a very good thing. And so at the end of, or after the end of Solomon's reign, and now the disaster that was the reign of Rehoboam, and now add to that Abijam, the only thing keeping the kingdom together was the faithfulness of God to his promises. And so God promised to bless David, and that blessing would go beyond just 2 generations. It wasn't just going to be, or 3, I guess you say, Solomon, Rehoboam, and now Abijam. It would continue on. And so God allowed this wicked king Abijam to set up his son, which would turn out to be Asa, and that would bring the nation of Judah back. Now, as I said when we were covering David, Judah, Israel or Judah, whichever term you want to use for it, they will never be as spiritually in tune with God as they were under the reign of David. And that's because David set the standard for them. And even here, the text mentions that, his heart was perfect, save for this one instance, right? Save for the whole Bathsheba and Uriah incident. And so, other than that, David, again, twice in Scripture, he's called a man after God's own heart. And so he kind of set the standard for them. He showed them the way to go. And we'll see that a little bit with Asa as well here in just a moment. But after him, things were, taking a downward tint, a downward spiral. And obviously after the end of Solomon, then you have Rehoboam, you have Abijam. Now people could be questioning, what in the world is happening with this nation? What in the world is going on? And so this is why God would allow this man Asa to arise. And it's one of the reasons why, as we'll see, that Judah lasted longer than Israel, because Israel never had an Asa. Israel never had a godly king after Solomon. And so they were all bad, from Jeroboam until its end. And so we'll see that as we go throughout. But Asa is very critical to the longevity of the nation of Judah. And so after continued war then between the two nations, Abijam then dies in the 21st year of Jeroboam's reign, and then Asa takes over and begins to rule Judah. And the reign of Asa was different in almost every way. Not only was it lengthy, it was 41 years, longer than even David and Solomon, 41 years compared to 3, but more importantly, much more importantly, Asa did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, as did David his father. And so one thing that's, let me, before I get there. And so we see that it says that he removed the Sodomites. And we talked about this in chapter 14, where that was male temple prostitutes. And so he removed the Sodomites. He removed the idols from the land. And one thing that's very impressive about Asa is that he actually removes his own mother. He takes away the fact that she is queen. He doesn't allow her to be queen anymore because she had set up, it says she made an idol in a grove. And it says Asa destroyed her idol and burnt it by the brook Kidron. And so even his own mother, he's like, no, I'm not going to allow this. It doesn't matter what your relation to me is. What matters is your relation to God. And so even his own mother was causing people to be steeped in this idolatrous practice. And Asa said, I'm not going to allow this, not in my reign. And so he removes his own mother. Now, I don't think he had his mother killed, but it says he removed her from being queen. And so even though he wasn't successful in removing all the high places, now it says, let's see, look at verse 14. It says, but the high places were not removed. Now, when you compare that to Chronicles, what you understand is that means all of them were not removed. He did remove some. He was just not successful in removing them completely out of the nation of Judah. But nevertheless, he made great inroads, right? He's taking idols out of the land. He's removing the sinful pagan practices that were in place because of these high places. And so he's trying to get people back to the covenant, back to following God as they should. But it says at the end of that verse, it says, Asa's heart was perfect with the Lord all his days. Now, this is a similar statement to David's, right? David had a heart after God's own heart. But we understand here in a similar fashion that this doesn't say that Asa was perfect. That's not what it's saying. It's not saying that Asa never sinned. Now, the King's author doesn't mention it as much as the Chronicles author. But when you get to the book of Chronicles and you read through Asa's story, particularly at the end of his reign, he did do a few sinful things. And so we understand that this wasn't saying, the author of Kings is not saying Asa was a perfect man. And that Asa never sinned. He never did wrong. He never broke the covenant. He never did a single thing as far as the transgression of the law was concerned. And so, but we understand again, neither was David, right? David wasn't perfect. And so when the Bible describes people this way, what they are not describing is someone who is perfect and never sins, but what they are describing is people who respond appropriately when they do sin. right? That's what the Bible is talking about. And so originally, you have David. Originally, he doesn't respond well. Obviously, he doesn't respond well at all with regards to Uriah. But God sends the prophet, and as soon as David's sins are kind of confronted and exposed, David had a very contrite heart. He was repentant, and he turned back to the Lord. And so Asa, this kind of defines him as well. And so, again, when God calls us all to be devoted to him, devoted to his law, devoted to do the things that we're supposed to do, we're supposed to be obedient. But the thing about it is that God knows that we will not do that perfectly. God knows that we will fail in that. So the question isn't, am I going to fail when it comes to following the commands of God? That's not the question. That's an easy answer. Yes, you will. The question is, how will I respond when I fail? How will I respond when I sin? Am I going to be like David and I'm going to have a contrite heart? Am I going to return to him for forgiveness and repentance? Or am I going to try and dig my grave a little bit deeper and cover up sin with lies and deceit and trickery and all these things that people tend to do at times? And so, again, Asa was not perfect. I would never insinuate as much. But generally speaking, he turned to the Lord even when he failed, even when he sinned. And so that's what the Bible is trying to indicate for us with regards to these two men. Now, okay, so we stopped reading there in verse 15. Let's pick it up in verse 16. It says, "And there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days." And so here we have an instance. We have not mentioned yet Baasha. We have not looked at him. If this was your first time reading it, you would have no idea who this guy is. And so this is one of those times where you just kind of have to hold on, and it'll be explained later. And Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah, and he built Ramah, that he might not suffer any to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. And then Asa took all the silver and gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord, the treasures of the king's house, and he delivered them into the hand of the servants. And King Asa sent them to Benhadad, the son of Tabrimon, the son of Hezion, king of Syria, that dwelt at Damascus, saying, "There is a league between me and thee, and between my father and thy father. Behold, I have sent unto thee a present of silver and gold. Come and break thy league with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may depart from me." And so Benhadad hearkened unto King Asa, and he sent the captains of the host which had come against the cities of Israel, and he smote Ijon and Dan and Abel Bethmaachah and all Cinneroth and with the land of Naphtali. And it says, "And it came to pass when Baasha heard thereof, that he left off building of Ramah, and he dwelt in Tirzah. And then King Asa made a proclamation throughout all Judah. None was exempted. And they took away the stones of Ramah and the timber thereof, wherewith Baasha had builded it. King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. And the rest of all the acts of Asa and all his might and all that he did and all the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Nevertheless, in the time of his old age, he was diseased in his feet, and Asa slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father, and Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead. And so, just like what we have seen already with Rehoboam and Jeroboam and Abijam, there was conflict. And so, again, there will be times when there is all-out, line up your troops and we're going to battle war. But when the author of Kings here speaks of war, it's typical just kind of conflicts and skirmishes, and again, it's not all-out battle, not yet at least. And so he was, again, for all the good that Asa did, he was unable to stop this constant back and forth. Now, Baasha, who again, he is now after Jeroboam, he is now the king of Israel. He began to build the city of Ramah. Now, this city was a border city. It was near the border of Israel and Judah. And essentially, he's trying to fortify this city and make it, you can kind of see it like a Jericho. He wants this city to be such that nobody can go to and from the two nations. I don't want anybody coming to Israel from Judah. I don't want anybody leaving Israel and going to Judah. Now, whereas the text never tells us, more than likely what is taking place here with Baasha is a similar notion to that of Jeroboam, which is, I don't want my people in Israel leaving and going to Judah because Judah has the temple, right? And so he understands, and all the Israelite kings understood, that would be a constant temptation is not the right word, but that would be something that the people would desire to do, because that's what they should have done. They should have gone to the temple. They had commands to go to the temple, and so they wanted to make it so that was that couldn't happen. And so he begins to build up this city. Well, obviously, Asa is not just going to sit back and just let this happen. Not only does this break any kind of possible economic ties and trading between the two countries, but much more importantly, it does make it so that Baasha is making it so that his people have to sin and that they cannot come to the temple. Right? And so Asa is not just going to sit back and allow this to take place. And so he begins to act. Now, what he does is wrong. And I'll say that from the outset. The way in which Asa responds to this is not the right way. And this becomes, again, even more clear in Chronicles when you understand earlier in Asa's life, he had a tremendous battle that he needed to take place in, his troops, and his troops were vastly outnumbered. And Asa just simply relied on God, and God granted Asa a tremendous victory in that particular battle. Well, here, instead of just relying on God, he kind of relied on wits and political machinations. And so this was not the proper response by a man who's supposed to be led by God to lead his country well. And so what he does then is he takes all the treasure from the palace and the temple, and treasures, I'll back you up to verse 15, treasures that were already mentioned that he had dedicated. It says, and he brought in the things which his father had dedicated and the things which himself had dedicated into the house of the Lord, silver and golden vessels. And so he takes these things that were dedicated to God, and he takes these treasures and these vessels and all these valuable things, and he sends them to Ben-Hadad, who was the king of Syria at the time. And so Asa reminds him, he says, listen, you and I have a good relationship, and our fathers had a good relationship. You had a league with me, our fathers had a league together, and so because of that, take this gift, i.e. bribe, that's what it is, take this gift, and maybe that will, give you some motivation to go against Baasha in Israel. Now, I understand that you also have a league with him. You have a compact, you have an agreement with Baasha. But look at this wonderful gift, right? Look at this. And so he gives them all these treasures, all this gold, all this silver. Again, things dedicated to God, and to break his covenant with Baasha and to come against Israel. Well, it works. Ben-Hadad does this. Now, Ben-Hadad would have been motivated not only by the bribe given him by Asa, but also the cities that they were able to take when they attacked Israel were major caravan routes. And so for Ben-Hadad, this opened up a lot of things that for him economically, and so this was a win-win for him. Ultimately, the downside of breaking his league with Baasha was very minimal with regards to what he was going to gain politically from this. And so he does this, and he breaks his league. He goes and he attacks the northern side of Israel. Well, Baasha can't just remain there in Ramah while the northern part of his nation is getting attacked. And so he had to leave, and he had to go fight against Ben-Hadad. And so as he leaves, Asa then, he sends out this nationwide proclamation. It says in verse 22, then King Asa made a proclamation throughout all Judah. None was exempted. And so this went beyond your typical draft for a war. Nobody's exempt from this. Every single person needs to come to Ramah right now. And they go and they order them to take away all the timber, take away all the stones that were being used to build up the city. And then, interestingly enough, Asa takes them and builds up some of his own cities. And so, again, it worked. What he did worked. But it was not reliant upon God for it to work. And this is one way in which Asa really went against his typical his godly nature. And so here we see, again, he wasn't a perfect man. This is one indication. It's much more clear in Chronicles, but even here, whereas the word bribe is not used, very clearly this is a bribe. I mean, nobody's disputing that. And so we come to the end of Asa's reign. And again, he reigned for 41 years. And so we're not getting the totality of all the things that he did. And so there's just some highlights that the authors of Kings and Chronicles point out, some of them good, some of them bad. And so here at the end of his 41-year reign, we see that he was diseased in his feet. Now it's debated as to what that was exactly, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it led to his death. And so whatever this particular disease was, it caused Asa to die after a 41-year reign. And after his death, his son Jehoshaphat began to reign. And so again, as I mentioned earlier, Asa was not a perfect king. However, that being said, after the end of Solomon, after Rehoboam, after Abijam, Asa was the king that Judah needed. It was the king that God put on the throne for a specific point in time to help bring his people back. And this is something that God does consistently with the nation of Judah. Now, it doesn't happen in Israel, and part of that is Jeroboam's own sinfulness. And then Judah, part of that is God's faithfulness to his covenant with David. But Asa, again, was the right man at the right time. Wasn't perfect, but generally speaking was a godly man who helped the longevity of the nation of Judah. And so let's look at verse 25. Verse 25, it says, And Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of his father, and in the sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. And Baasha, the son of Ahijah, of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha smote him at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, for Nadab and all Israel laid siege to Gibbethon. Even in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, did Baasha slay him, and reigned in his stead. And it came to pass when he reigned that he smote all his house of Jeroboam. And he left not to Jeroboam any that breathed, until he had destroyed him, according unto the saying of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. Because of the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, and which he had made Israel sin, by his provocation wherewith he provoked the Lord God of Israel to anger. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. In the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, began Baasha the son of Ahijah to reign over all Israel in Tirzah 24 years. And again, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and walked in the way of Jeroboam, and in the sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. And so that will be a constant refrain, is that the kings of Israel caused them to sin, as did Jeroboam did. And so, again, we see a kind of a direct line from Jeroboam until their destruction. And this is something that both Chronicles and Kings make pretty clear. And so after Jeroboam, his son Nadab takes over. But similar to Abijah, very short, we don't know much about it. And what we do know is what the Bible describes for us. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he walked in the way of his father, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. In other words, not only did he continue to, or not only did he not take away the sins of Jeroboam, not take away the high places, not take away the idols, but he perpetuated it. He continued to pursue pagan idolatry, pagan worship, pagan practice. And so this is what Jeroboam did. This is what his son did. This is what the Israelite kings would continue to do. And so after only 2 years then, Baasha conspired against him. Now, we don't know what led to this conspiracy. We don't know if it was, hey, this guy is evil and I'm going to do right, and then just simply fell into the same old thing. We don't know if it was just purely political and I just want power and he's the guy standing in the way. And so we don't know what led to the actual conspiracy by Baasha, but nevertheless, it was successful. And so Nadab is leading a campaign against the Philistines. He's sieging this particular city, and during this siege is when Baasha comes up and assassinates Nadab. And so to secure his position then, and we talked about this a little bit when there was a transition from Saul to David. To secure his position, he did what was pretty typical in those times when assassinations took place. It's not that I just kill you, it's that I kill all of you. Because if I just kill you, then perhaps some other family member comes up and say, well, I have a claim to the throne. Right? I'm the next of kin, I'm the next in line. And so in order to make sure that that does not happen, you don't just kill the king, you kill the king and all the king's family. And so this is exactly what Baasha does. He assassinates Nadab, and then he kills, it says, all that breathe of the house of Jeroboam. Now, not only did this secure Baasha's position, but interestingly enough, this was God's fulfillment of a prophecy to Jeroboam. And so this man Baasha, I feel very confident in saying that at not any singular point during this assassination attempt and the overthrow of the whole family, did Baasha ever once think, I am the one fulfilling God's prophecy. I don't think at one time that came into that man's mind. But that does not mean that God cannot use, we've talked about this several times, that God cannot use the sinfulness of others to bring about his will. He does it all the time. And so here again, was Baasha wrong to do this? Yes, it was murder. There's nothing good about what Baasha did. but it still fulfilled God's prophecy to Jeroboam, was to say that I'm not just taking out you, I'm cutting off your whole family. And so God used the sinful aspirations of Baasha to take out the king and his family as a means to bring judgment and fulfillment of prophecy against Jeroboam and his family because of his sinfulness. And so again, God is not constrained by our sin. God is not sitting up in heaven and thinking, there's all these things that I would love to do, but man, I just can't because all these sinful people are keeping me from doing what I want to do. No, God is sovereign, and he is sovereign over all things, and he will use this. Now, does that mean he caused the sin of Baasha? No, he used the sin of Baasha. Baasha willingly chose to commit these sins, and God sovereignly chose to use those sins to bring about his will. And so this is an interesting aspect of the God that we serve. It's one of those things that we can't fully wrap our minds around. But nevertheless, this is how the Bible consistently portrays God, and it's a God that it's a joy to serve. I don't want to serve a God that's not sovereign. I don't want to serve a God who really is constrained by sinful humanity. That's not a God that I want to serve. I want to serve a sovereign God, and that's the God that the Bible presents to us. Now, if you were an Israelite, just a random citizen of Israel at this particular time, perhaps you may have thought, well, whereas I'm not pro-assassination, maybe this means that we'll get somebody good on the throne, and maybe this means things will turn around. I would submit that there were always a remnant of God followers. There were always a remnant of God following people in both Israel and Judah. Now that remnant may have been a very, very small remnant, but I do believe that God always has a remnant. And so perhaps, again, you were an Israelite thinking maybe this is God's going to use this to bring about positive things, positive changes, get back to the covenant, doing things the right way. Well, that's just not how it would go. And so it says, considering Baasha, and it says, then he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he walked in the way of Jeroboam, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin. And so what's interesting about this is that even though Baasha is of no relation to Jeroboam, he's not in the line of Jeroboam, the text still relates his sin to Jeroboam, right? And he walked in the way of Jeroboam. And so again, it all goes back to him. It all goes back to the fact that he just immediately, right? He immediately sets up these golden bulls, and he immediately takes people away from the true worship of God, and he immediately tells them, you don't need to go to the temple anymore, right? We have these bulls, and you can just go worship these bulls, and it's basically the same thing. And he institutes pagan practices, and so the power went to his head so quickly that he immediately disregarded anything that had anything to do with the covenant or worshiping God in the proper manner. And so because of that, all of these kings, even though there's no relation anymore to Jeroboam, they're still sinning as Jeroboam sinned. They walked in the way of Jeroboam. And keep in mind, God promised Jeroboam, if you are obedient and if you do things the right way, he says, I will set up for you what I have done for David. Essentially, what God promised is that there would be a consecutive line of David ruling Judah, there would be a consecutive line of Jeroboam ruling Israel, and it would be a blessing to your family, and through you I would bless Israel. God promised Jeroboam all these things, and he should have known that it was true, because at the same time as when God promised, I'm going to make you the king, well, guess what? Now he's king. So he knows that promise came true. He knows that God keeps his promises. And again, immediately, just the power goes to his head. He begins to sin in these terrible, awful ways. And because of that, his whole family was cut off. And now all these future kings doing sinfully, they're still equated to Jeroboam. They walked in the way of Jeroboam. And so Baasha would be no different. It is a new line, but it's the same old sins. Nothing new here. And so they're continuing to bring the city or the nation of Israel down into sinful depths. Now, even though a wicked king was assassinated, only to be replaced by a regime just as wicked, there is still encouragement to be found in this. And so I want to quote Davis here because it says it so well. But you think about this and you think, well, where's the hope? Where's the hope to be found in all this? Well, let me read this quote for you. He says, an evil aspirant massacres an evil dynasty. Yahweh uses evil men to annihilate their own kind. Evil Baasha is simply a servant carrying out Yahweh's good word. This text makes a profound point. Here you see how subservient evil really is. It is only a slave of Yahweh. What a cut down for evil, and what a bracing encouragement, if she has eyes to see it, for the church. And so, in other words, what does that mean? Yes, there's a whole lot of wicked. There's a whole lot of evil. There's a whole lot of sin that surrounds us. There was a whole lot of wicked, evil, and sin that surrounded the people of Israel. But does that mean God's not on the throne? Does that mean God's not ruling? Does that mean God's promises will not come to fruition? No, absolutely not. All of these things are still subservient to him. Now, again, as I said earlier, it doesn't mean he caused them, but they are subservient to him. And so here, again, we stand in the 21st century surrounded by evil and by wickedness. In fact, this is often a point that atheist groups and things like that will use against the existence of God. A common argument that will say, well, how can you claim that there is a God in the world when there's all these evil things that take place? To which I would respond, why do you even think anything is evil if you have no objective moral standard? Just by the fact that you are claiming evil exists speaks to the fact that we have at least something that promotes a moral standard. Because evolution didn't do that. The Big Bang didn't do that. There must be something telling us that there are things objectively good and objectively bad. But nevertheless, and so the typical argument goes something along the lines of God, if he exists, cannot be, here's what they'll say, that God cannot be both all sovereign or all good. Because an all good God would not allow all the wicked to take place, or an all sovereign God would stop all the wicked from taking place. So he cannot be all good or all sovereign at the same time. That's kind of the typical argument. But what they fail to see, again, number one, is that his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We get a very unfocused view of all the events of mankind. We get, and we have just a speck of our lives here on the broad timeline of humanity. And so we think we have it all figured out. But to truly insinuate that I, as this one insignificant person, have figured out the totality of all the universe's secrets, and that I somehow know more than God, even if he exists, you're placing yourself up on a pedestal that no thinking person would ever rightfully put themselves on. And so here we understand that God is working all things together for good. Romans 8:28, he's working all things together for good to them that love him. To them that love him and are called according to his purpose. And so God is working all things according to his will. He uses and allows evil and wickedness to take place in this world. He's not causing it, but he uses it, he allows it, and the more wicked the world becomes, the brighter the light of truth shines. Goodness and holiness shines brightest against a backdrop of holiness and wickedness. And so what we understand is that God is simultaneously perfectly and all good and perfectly and all sovereign. They don't conflict. They don't contradict one another. And so we get into a situation like this in Israel, where somebody's thinking, well, what in the world, God? We just had all these bad kings, and now this assassination takes place, and this guy's come in, he's just doing the same old evil, wicked stuff. And so, the thought, they could have been thinking kind of the same things that these philosophical groups and things promote today. But when you really study the totality of Scripture, and when you understand that there is a through line of Scripture, of one single story, God is concerned with the redemption of mankind. That's what God is concerned with. And you know how one of the supreme ways in which God is bringing about the redemption of mankind was to use the ultimate evil, which was the murder of the only perfect man who's ever lived, to bring about the redemption of murderers, to bring about the redemption of sinful humanity. Only a good sovereign God can do that. Only a good sovereign God can do that. And so, I understand it's sometimes difficult to see, sometimes difficult to understand. I believe it's the prophet Habakkuk. The prophet Habakkuk struggled with this when God said he was going to use the Assyrians to bring judgment against Israel. And Habakkuk is saying, hold on, God. Man, they're evil. They're wicked. Why would you use them? Not that we don't deserve judgment, but why would you use somebody who's possibly objectively even more evil and more wicked? To which God responds, listen, you don't know everything. And by the way, their judgment is also coming. So don't worry about it, right? And so, yeah, we don't get all the answers. We don't deserve all the answers. But what we do get, what we do see is enough to see that we serve a good, sovereign, holy God. And Scripture continually bears that truth out. Again, some very interesting and important things to see with regards to the history of Israel, the history of Judah. And by the way, and I'll just close on this thought, the Israelites could only complain insofar as they disregarded their own sin. Because what led to these things? Sinfulness. And so the king set up these sinful, idolatrous high places. But guess who used them? It wasn't just the king. It was all the people of Israel. Most of the people, I guess I should say, of Israel. And so their own sinfulness is what brought this to bear out. All right, well, let me pray, and we'll be dismissed this morning. Lord, we do